Hello and welcome back. On the eve of the vice presidential debate, the national poll average continues to show a tight race. Hillary Clinton enjoys a 2.9-point lead in the Real Clear Politics average in a two-way race and a nearly identical lead of 2.8 in a four-way. That lead might be considerably larger, except for the effect of a single poll, which is the only one in the RCP average which shows a Trump lead. I'm speaking of the one which the Los Angeles Times has been conducting with the University of Southern California. There you see it. As of tonight, that poll, as you can see, shows Mr. Trump with a 5-point advantage. The betting odds, meanwhile, still favoring Hillary Clinton to win. Right now, those odds are at 72.2, as you can tell there, to 25.2 on her to win. For more on this, we turn to Scott Jennings, who did political analysis for the George W. Bush White House. Scott, I want to talk to you about this USC LA Times poll, which is different from the other polls. It is the only poll. That poll is the only poll now, as I mentioned, currently showing a Donald Trump lead, and it hasn't shown Hillary Clinton ahead since back at the end of the one they took right after her convention. Could you just tell us what's different about this poll?
Yeah, Britt, this poll is different because they are polling the same group of people every night. They have a pool of about 3,200 people that they poll every night. It's a tracking poll, so every day's average is an average of the previous nights with today's added in. This poll also is different because of the way they are collecting the sample of people that they're polling. They ask people to self-report who they voted for in the 2012 presidential election. Some analysts believe because people don't remember correctly who they voted for, or maybe they don't tell the truth about who they voted for, that your sample could be off when you gather a sample that way. And some people believe maybe the sample could be a little bit too Republican because there were some Romney voters who were essentially occupying slots that should have been Obama voters in this survey. But one thing about this survey that is true, you can follow trends. Yeah.
Let me stop you right there. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Why would Romney voters be represented as Obama voters or the other way around? I didn't get that.
Well, when you were picking the sample of voters, you would ask people, did you vote for Obama or Romney in 2012? And if you misremembered who you voted for or you misreported who you voted for, let's say I'm a Romney voter, but I said I voted for Obama, then I would be occupying a slot that wasn't meant for me in the sample and vice versa. So because of the way they've gathered up the sample. Yeah. So in this case, there are some analysts that believe there may be too many Romney voters in the sample. Of course, we won't know until election night. They may be, getting it right and everybody else may be getting it wrong. But as you say, they're the only poll in the nation showing Trump with a lead.
Right. But they also have by far the largest sample, correct?
That is correct. They have a pool of over 3,000 people they're tracking on a nightly basis. But again, how it differs from other surveys, it's the same group every single night. Most other surveys are doing random sampling every night. They're not tracking polls. It's a random sample of different people every night.
So I guess that poll would be most useful if you used the poll to compare with that poll's earlier results rather than comparing them to other polls.
That is correct. What you're looking for in a survey like this is trends. How are things flowing? And here again, since the debate, we're seeing this survey showing not really a trend toward Hillary Clinton. In fact, showing Donald Trump doing just fine in this. So again, if you believe the sample is too pro-Republican, that's something that you would expect. But unlike the other national surveys, we're not seeing it flow back towards Hillary the way we're seeing in the Fox News poll, the CNN poll that came out tonight, and several others.
Right. And there's one last question I want to ask you, and this is about the aftermath of the debate, which at least 3 polls and maybe more have shown people overwhelmingly thought that Hillary Clinton had won. And yet in the national polling averages, we're not seeing a big result there. But in our own poll, our own Fox News poll that came out on Friday, we did see some interesting trends in terms of how people felt about the candidates on the issues. Let's take a look at that poll result, which showed issue results. We should be able to put it up on the screen. There you see foreign policy, immigration, terrorism, crime, all favor Hillary Clinton. Overwhelmingly on foreign policy, remarkably so on immigration, terrorism even, which has been a big theme for Mr. Trump, and crime she even leads on. Only on government corruption and the economy does Mr. Trump lead, and only narrowly on the economy. Is that a sign? I mean, those numbers all look pretty favorable to her. Is that a sign, perhaps, of people's reaction to the debate, excuse me?
Yes, I think the debate reaction is coloring these numbers. And there was another number in the Fox News poll that I think helps explain it, and that was on temperament. She had a net 16-point gain on temperament Donald Trump's image was largely unchanged, but her temperament number spiked, and temperament goes to how can you handle a crisis? And you would say terrorism, national security, and crime issues might be more in the crisis bucket, where Trump continues to lead is on the economy bucket because he's obviously pitching himself as a businessman who's created jobs. That's why the New York Times tax story is interesting, not because of taxes, but because of whether or not it will puncture his narrative of being a successful businessman. So right now, on the top 3 issues, she leads on 2. But for Trump, the most important issue, the economy, he retains a lead. He really needs to get back to that narrative of trade and creating jobs in the next debate and not get bogged down by other things, because that's the one area where he may still have room to run against Hillary Clinton.
All right. Scott Jennings, thank you very much.
Thanks, Brett.
Throughout this campaign, Donald Trump has done what no Republican presidential candidate since Nixon has done, and that is to withhold his tax returns. Now, a leak to the New York Times has revealed Mr. Trump 21 years ago reported a nearly $1 billion loss that could have allowed him to avoid taxes for nearly 2 decades. So, what impact, if any, will this have on the race? Our nightly political panel is here. National political correspondent for National Public Radio, Mara Liasson, and Fortune Magazine senior editor, Nina Easton. Good evening to you both. Nina, your thoughts on the impact of this New York Times story over the weekend?
Well, here's the thing. The Trump voters, the core Trump voter, has been remarkably forgiving of Donald Trump, who's posed as this billionaire populist all the way along. So anything having to do with his business dealings, whether it's, multiple bankruptcies or the fact that he started off with multi-million dollars from his father, or whether it's Trump University, I mean, they've been forgiving. They haven't flocked away from him. I think this is going to fall in that same category. I think Trump's problem is reaching beyond his core. I've always said that. And there's a really interesting number in the Fox poll that came out last Friday night that showed sort of the core Hillary haters at about, or 39%, the people who would never vote for Hillary. It shows the core sort of Trump haters who would never vote for Trump at 47%. So it suggests that he has more resistance in expanding his base and his core.
Yeah, he has very enthusiastic voters. We've seen that all throughout. His numbers on enthusiasm are generally higher than hers. Democrats seem to be voting with their heads, not their hearts this year. But he does have to expand. He's in the low 40s too much in these polls. And what I think you see, the damage from the tax story, and you see Hillary Clinton going after this, is, oh, he's not such a great businessman after all. And that is the core. The loss, not the not paying taxes.
It's not the fact that he got out of some taxes. It's that he lost $1 billion in a year, nearly $1 billion in a year.
You lost $1 billion in a year. You laid off people. You stiffed small businessmen, and then they finally get to it, and then you didn't pay any taxes. But they're going to ask him questions. How did you, I expect this to come up in the next debate, how'd you lose $1 billion?
But he also went through bankruptcies, so that issue sort of played out. I think
bankruptcy of 4 of his enterprises.
Of 4 of his enterprises. I think the thing that she can attack on is the fact that his lenders continued to let him live this lavish lifestyle of almost $500,000, $450,000 a month, to keep the homes, the properties. So what average person gets away with that, while not paying taxes?
And the irony of that is,
how many people will find that out? I mean, how many people are going to know that?
Well, she'll probably bring it up. But the interesting thing about that is, the irony of that is, wow, sounds like a rigged system.
Yeah, and that's why he's gotten away with this, I think, because he's constantly said
it's a little peculiar to say, look, I did exactly what I was supposed to do, and this was good business, and I'm not ashamed of it. And the system is rigged and ought to be changed by me.
Except that he's not proposing to do away with the parts of the system that allowed him to do that. He's not saying we should get rid of all these deductions, including net operating loss and lower taxes. I'm pretty sure in his tax plan, although he does get rid of carried interest for hedge fund managers, he does not get rid of the rules that allowed him to do this.
We're going to talk more about this later with Jonathan Turley, who's in here, on the question of exactly why those so-called loopholes are in the tax code, and whether indeed Donald Trump was doing something that's improper, or whether he was doing exactly what Congress intended.
Exactly what Congress
intended. He called it a rigged system when he was giving political donations to Democrats, too. It falls into the same category.
There you go. Nina, Mara, stick around. We'll come back to you a little later. Donald Trump has a rally soon in Colorado. He spoke about his taxes earlier. Will he do that again tonight? We'll probably find out. Fox News senior national correspondent John Roberts is in Pueblo, Colorado, where Trump spoke earlier. Hi, John.
Good evening to you, Brett. I expect when he speaks in Loveland, Colorado, just a short time from now, he will go down the same road that he went down a couple of hours ago here in Pueblo. Clearly, Donald Trump has decided that the best way to fight this controversy surrounding the release of partial tax returns from 1995 is to fight fire with fire, hitting Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton today as people who, as Trump said, sold access in exchange for big dollar speaking gigs, making millions of dollars off of Wall Street banks. Meantime, Donald Trump says that he was spending his time building businesses, helping out the community, creating jobs. He made absolutely no apologies today, Brett, for taking full advantage of the tax code as a businessman. Listen to what he said just a short time ago.
It's my job to minimize the overall tax burden to the greatest extent possible, which allows me to reinvest in neighborhoods, in workers, and build amazing properties, which fuel tremendous growth in their communities.
Earlier today, in his first appearance of a very busy campaign day, he was talking to a veterans group in Herndon, Virginia. Cybersecurity and national security were the central focus of that. Donald Trump saying as president he would do a top-down review of America's approach to cybersecurity, suggesting Hillary Clinton is incapable of doing it because of the way that she handled her email problem. But Donald Trump also running into a fusillade of controversy when asked about post-traumatic stress disorder by one member of the military. Listen to how Donald Trump answered that question.
When people come back from war and combat and they see things that maybe a lot of the folks in this room have seen many times over, and you're strong and you can handle it, but a lot of people can't handle it.
Donald Trump was criticized both in the media and on Twitter for suggesting they thought that he was saying that only people who are weak get post-traumatic stress disorder and that strong people don't. The Marine Staff Sergeant who asked him the question, Chad Robichaux, was quite upset by what happened in the fallout to that. So he issued a statement through the Trump campaign saying the following, quote, "I think it's sickening that anyone would twist Mr. Trump's comments to me in order to pursue a political agenda. I took his comments to be thoughtful and understanding of the struggles many veterans have, and I believe he is committed to helping them." So some very strong support there from Staff Sergeant Robichaux on this controversy that erupted after Donald Trump made those comments, Brett, about PTSD.
John, thank you as always.
Thanks, Brett.
So what about those provisions in the tax code that could allow a businessman who lost a lot of money one year to avoid income taxes for years into the future? And what about the legality of the New York Times obtaining and publishing information from Mr. Trump's 1995 tax returns? To address both questions, I'm joined by my old friend, Professor Jonathan Turley of George Washington University Law School. Welcome.
Thanks, Britt.
Nice to see you, Jonathan. So the clear implication, it seemed, of the Times report on Mr. Trump's 1995 tax return was that he had improperly gotten out of paying taxes. What about that?
No, it's from what I can see, it's not illegal. You know, in this area, particularly real estate, debt is managed as much as profits. That is, you can make as much money, believe it or not, with debt as you can often in moving profits.
How so?
Well, there's a thing called a net operating loss, where you can actually claim losses to investments, even losses experienced by the bank, not you personally, and use that to protect you against taxation. Companies do this all the time. Major companies often don't pay much taxes. It's a long-standing criticism.
Income taxes.
Right, and it's a long-standing criticism. And there are very good arguments to make that we should close these types of loopholes, but these are very common. And for people in D.C. to do this Claude Rains act of "I'm shocked that someone's not paying their taxes," really doesn't play very well.
Well, if of course if it's legal, it's not their taxes. It's right there being asked to. They're not obligated to pay those. But what about the question of whether these are? I mean, why would Congress, if this is a way of skipping taxes improperly in the eyes of a lot of people, why would Congress have put these provisions in the code?
I think the purpose is they would rather lose that taxpayer than lose the business. That is, they're giving people an ability to come back. I mean, all the bankruptcy laws and all the tax laws are designed, at least on the surface, to try to keep people in the game, to keep them and work them back into profitability, because they employ people, they produce things necessary for the country. So you have these laws that allow people to, count debt against their taxes, and companies use it, individuals use it widely. And so this is not a shocking event. You can certainly argue that this isn't a good thing, but it's not necessarily an illegal thing.
Well, it's also the case, apparently, that this is what the tax laws written by Congress encourage people to do because they believe it's the conduct that results is valuable.
That's right. I mean, people like Trump are margin players. You know, many people in the market are margin players. They look at that margin of profit and costs, and they play with it in a way that maximizes their wealth.
Right.
And you play that margin with everything. You play with profit, you play with debt, and you use as much of the law as you can to do that. Now, the public has a right to say there's some things we don't want you to do anymore, and this may be one of them. But the law does allow you to manage debt this way.
So the argument is made about the New York Times that it illegally published this tax return information. What about that?
Well, there are federal laws and state laws that say that you cannot publish a tax return without authority or permission, and you can
From
also,
the taxpayer.
That's right, and you also cannot publish return information that's referred to. So technically, there could be a criminal case made, but this is not a good case for that. This is
Why?
Well, because the New York Times didn't break into someone's office and steal this information. A source came to them, and with all the broken china we have in this election, we don't need to take after the First Amendment and add it to this national fit of passion.
The argument is made that because Dean Baquet, editor of the New York Times, at a seminar or a public event sometime a few weeks back, said that he would go to jail to publish those tax
Right.
returns, that in effect makes him complicit in their release to him, although albeit anonymously. What do you think of that argument?
Well, I'm sure the New York Times reporters were crawling in fetal positions in the back of the room when he said that.
Why?
Because technically you can't face a criminal charge for something like this. But what protects you is press freedom. But that's not always clear. There's always a risk in these types of cases. The fact is that this is a journalist doing what journalists do. They have a whistleblower or some type of source that gives them embarrassing information about someone or part of the government. That was the Pentagon Papers, and all of the major scandals we have often came from disclosures from people who are not supposed to disclose them.
So there could be a case against the discloser, but not the disclosee? Is that essentially what you're saying?
That's basically right. That is, journalists are afforded a great deal of latitude, and it's a good thing. And we have to, at some point, have some rules in this game. And going after media for publishing stuff from sources of this kind, in my view, is a bridge too far.
Jonathan, good to see you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Rick.
for doing this.
Thanks.
And right now, let's speed read other news in the world of politics. The Donald Trump Foundation just hit with a cease and desist order. The New York State Attorney General has ordered Trump's charity to immediately halt all fundraising in the state of New York. On Friday, the New York AG said Trump's charity broke state law by not having the proper New York State certification. That AG, by the way, a Hillary supporter. Former President Bill Clinton just blasted Obamacare at a Hillary Clinton event in Michigan. President Clinton called it a, quote, crazy system that, quote, doesn't make any sense. President Clinton went on to say that Obamacare is hurting small businesses and low-income Americans. A big court win for Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. The U.S. Supreme Court has declined to reopen a stalled investigation into Governor Walker's 2012 recall election campaign. Prosecutors had investigated whether Walker's campaign coordinated improperly with conservative advocacy groups. Walker is the first ever state governor in U.S. history to survive a recall election. And some Twitter users have learned that details do matter. A flurry of angry tweets meant to be sent to debate moderator Lester Holt actually went to Chicago Cubs pitcher John Lester. But the pitcher took things in stride and even responded to a lot of his, quote, critics. To someone called I'm Your Huckleberry, Lester tweeted, whoa, buddy, pretty sure you have the wrong Lester. To Donnell Murray, Lester responded, you might want to take that up with Lester Holt. And to Mike Brown, 44, Lester said, I'll be pretty busy doing my own thing, so I think I'll be okay. Perhaps you should send this to Lester Holt. Meanwhile, new information about a deal to destroy the computers of two people who worked very closely with Hillary Clinton. The FBI is behind that deal. Catherine Herridge takes you inside it next. And then campus craziness. If you thought it couldn't get any crazier, just wait till you hear tonight's installments of that series. And all new campus craziness plus Tucker Carlson to respond to it. Stay with us. New details about the immunity deals for two top Hillary Clinton aides. Former Clinton Chief of Staff Cheryl Mills and ex-campaign staffer Heather Samuelson were granted immunity in the FBI's Clinton email server investigation. And sources tell Fox News that part of that deal included the destruction of laptops. Fox News Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here. So, Catherine, what's this all about?
Well, a letter was obtained by us today, and it was sent by the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. That's the committee that had the hearing last week with FBI Director Comey. And this letter went to the Attorney General and said, we've now reviewed these deals, and what we see is that there are two side agreements, one for Mills and one for Samuelson. And they are very important figures because they're the ones who sorted the emails and determined what should be kept and what could be destroyed. And part of the deal was that the FBI could get access to these laptops. But Mills and Samuelson got immunity for obstructing justice and a guarantee
You mean immunity from obstruction of justice?
Correct. Sorry, pardon me, from that. And then also that after the FBI had searched the laptops, that they would destroy them.
Why? Now, these were their laptops, right?
That's correct,
Right.
but...
So, can you think of a legitimate reason for destroying the laptops?
Well, I spoke with two different national security defense attorneys today. One said to me that the thing that puzzles them so much is that once classified information was on those computers, a government record, it automatically became government property. And he didn't understand why they had to strike a deal when they should have been able to seize the computer because it had government property. The other attorney said to me that when you have...
It wasn't as if they would have been taken away from them and they would have lost their laptops. They destroyed them.
That's right. Yeah, and here's the really puzzling thing, and you're really onto the leading edge of this. There are outstanding Freedom of Information Act lawsuits and then outstanding congressional investigations. And what's so puzzling is why these laptops would be destroyed when these matters are not resolved.
I must say, Catherine, when I sat there that day when James Comey came out and gave the news conference, which was so damning in many respects of Hillary Clinton's behavior, and then announced that, on agonizing balance, we decided not to prosecute, I thought, well, that sounds like he was on the up and up. The more I hear, the less it seems like.
We can't see these agreements, and I think the language would be very important, but the more we seem to know about this investigation and how it deviated from standard practice, the less people have faith, including Republicans on the Hill, that it was done in an impartial way. And in fact, Chairman Goodlatte says the evidence suggests that's correct. He says the evidence suggests that there was a predetermined outcome from the Justice Department that gave these deals.
Oh, it looks one way that way, doesn't it? Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the top schools in the country wants its male students to think about their, quote, toxic masculinity. You can't make this stuff up. Our Campus Craziness segment, plus Tucker Carlson to react to it, next. Time now to take a look at some of the craziness at our nation's colleges and other schools. A new program at Duke University aims to provide male-identified students with a safe space where they can contemplate their toxic masculinity. According to the website Heat Street, the program is a 9-week course called the Duke Men's Project and will discuss male privilege, patriarchy, the language of dominance, rape culture, pornography, machismo, and other topics. An editorial in the school newspaper titled Engendering Gender Harmony notes that it is, quote, not a re-education camp being administered by an oppressed group in the service of the feminization of American society, end quote. However, a male student who supports the program told Heat Street that the program will help men, quote, proactively deconstruct our masculinity, end quote. And Duke isn't the only university on the defense from accusations of re-educating students. A recent graduate of Columbia University says he was forced to go through re-education from the university's official gender-based misconduct office because he once referred to himself as handsome in class. The graduate wrote about his experience in The Tab, a website for freelance journalism, but waited until he was no longer a student to publish his account. The comment, which apparently offended another student, led to meetings with the professor and the dean, in addition to the gender-based misconduct office. An official at the school told Fox News it wouldn't comment on this individual case, but noted that, quote, the school takes gender-based misconduct very seriously. As Halloween approaches, some universities have taken steps to combat offensive costumes. Penn State University launched a poster campaign called We're a Culture, Not a Costume. The posters feature minority students holding pictures of costumes they consider offensive to their heritage. The University of Wisconsin-La Crosse has also taken measures to combat offensive costumes. The Ethnic and Racial Studies Department has plans to host a student meeting titled, "Is Your Costume Racist?" Representatives from Penn State and the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse said the initiatives are not meant to ban costumes, but simply to inform students about what might be considered offensive. And a student at Manville High School in New Jersey says he was suspended and told to undergo a psychological exam for a class project in which he expressed views against gun control. According to the Newark Star-Ledger, the student refused to see the psychologist and dropped out of the high school. The superintendent of the school district denies any wrongdoing and accused the student and his family of taking advantage of laws that prevent the district from commenting on the suspension. If you've got a campus craziness story, let us know. Email us and tell us about it, campuscraziness@foxnews.com. We'd appreciate hearing from you. Now, here to react to all of that stuff is the co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend, my friend Tucker Carlson. So, Tucker,
Brent,
what is going on here?
Well, as someone who's lived in Washington for most of his life, the first thing I think when I see these stories is conservatives here in the district have spent the last 20 years really focused on things like tax rates. And sort of the assumption was, well, the evangelicals will handle the social issues. You know, those matter less. Those are secondary issues. And it turns out they're primary issues. If you allow the lunatics to define what, for example, the family unit is to your own children, you're going to wind up with a deeply dysfunctional society. So this sort of thing is the kind of thing I think that we should have been paying a lot more attention to in years earlier.
What, because it produces generations of students who, what?
Who don't understand what makes society stable and prosperous. So if you make a list of the most basic questions in life, they're not, what's the capital gains tax? They really are questions like, should you get married before having children? That's like the most basic question any society asks itself, and yet it's one that our public intellectuals rarely debate, and so it's left to sort of third-rate minds at our universities to tell our kids the answer. And of course their answer is very different from, I think, the right answer. And it also allows people in colleges, professors in colleges, to do things like, I don't know, redefine, you know, the biological reality of gender and pretend it doesn't exist. This has long-term ramifications that I don't think we're thinking through. And most people sort of in our world are like, you know, it's crazy, but it'll go away. It won't go away. If your children grow up learning that there's no actual distinction between men and women, what does that mean long-term?
Speaking of which, I want you to help me with something that was altogether new to me, but I'm told this idea has been around a while. Let's put it up on the screen. There are people who want to be referred to not as he or she or him or her, but Z and Zer. Now, I hardly know what to say about this. Can you explain what this is all about? I mean, and how to use these terms in a sentence, perhaps?
I can't, and I don't plan to learn, and it's very easy to dismiss because it's so prima facie ludicrous. These are children sort of playing at language. It's sort of the French Revolution idea. We're going to make it up anew. But here's what I think they're not thinking through, the proponents of this. If your sex is what you say it is, if there's no sort of basis in biological reality, what would prevent me, if convicted of a felony, from saying, you know what, I don't want to serve time in a men's prison. I demand to go to a women's prison. I mean, what would be the argument against me? Or as a business owner, why shouldn't I be eligible for, I don't know, women-owned business grants that the Small Business Administration gives to women-owned businesses? Because I'm now a woman.
Because and you're a woman because you just announced that you're a woman.
And on what basis can you deny me that grant? If the criterion for being as a woman is saying you're one, and that appears to be the kind of working definition we're going with now under the Obama administration, think this through. I mean, this is going to completely alter the world that we live in, and possibly not in a good way. And I don't think its advocates have really kind of gamed it out at all. They're just kind of playing around, but this stuff has consequences long-term for sure.
Tucker, thank you, Zer.
Thank you, Z. I appreciate it.
Forget for a moment about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Tomorrow night, their vice presidential picks will take the center stage. Could this vice presidential debate shake up the race, really? The panel is straight ahead on that. Plus, a new spin on a fan favorite, more mean tweets, but this time they have a theme. Stick around to hear them all. We'll be back shortly. Live from D.C., it's On the Record. But on Saturday night, of course, it was the presidential candidate spoofed on the season premiere of Saturday Night Live. Many of us could watch this again and again.
There's still 88 minutes left. It's a 90-minute debate.
My microphone is broken.
She broke it with Obama. She and Obama stole my microphone. They took it to Kenya. They took my microphone to Kenya, and they broke it, and now it's broken. And you hear that? It's picking up somebody sniffing here. I think it's her sniffs. She's been sniffing all night. Testing, testing. Gina, huge Gina.
Secretary Clinton, what do you think about that?
I think I'm going to be president.
So Alec Baldwin there making his debut as Donald Trump, and Kate McKinnon continuing her Emmy Award-winning role as you-know-who. I'm sure we'll see plenty more of this before the election is over. 12 years ago, after President George W. Bush had debated Democratic nominee John Kerry, a blurry photo of Mr. Bush taken from behind ignited claims he'd been wearing a wire during the debate. Mr. Bush's tailor said it was a pucker in his coat, and Secret Service sources told the Hill newspaper that it was a strap holding a bulletproof vest in place. But the conspiracy theories, never quite went away. Now, as we reported last week, they are back again, this time about Hillary Clinton at the debate, and our report last week did not succeed in dampening them. For the latest theories, here's Fox News Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen. James?
With only days to go until the second Trump-Clinton debate, many remain focused on the first one, with fresh allegations of conspiracy sprouting like weeds. In fact, the Commission on Presidential Debates published no rule forbidding the moderator from using an earpiece, only one that forbade anyone to speak to Holt through that earpiece who was not Marty Slutsky, the Commission's executive producer since 2000.
Notice a light inside her podium there.
Still, other theories have focused on the podium used by Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton, with some pointing to what seemed like an inordinate amount of attention paid to it in the minutes preceding the main event, and others suggesting Clinton benefited from a built-in teleprompter, sending her talking points in real time, complete with a controller of some kind.
If the Clinton campaign had decided they wanted to put some sort of secret mechanics into the podium, it would have been a really foolish route to take because people would have found out and it would have made Hillary look terrible. I think this really points to a low level of trust in the media. People are really suspicious of what prominent news organizations, including mine, tell them, and they think there's some sort of secret truth that's being covered up.
Late today, we heard from Frank Fahrenkopf Jr., one of the co-chairs of the Commission on Presidential Debates, who told us each podium was outfitted with a light, as well as note paper and a pen, standard issue for each nominee. But, Britt, no teleprompters. In full disclosure, I just used one to deliver that tag.
And I have an earpiece.
Me as well. Yes.
Well, there you go. So we're part of the conspiracy. Let me ask you about another theory that arose, which is that we noted last week that a man we discovered was Brady Williamson, longtime Democratic aide, worked on many campaigns, working on the Hillary campaign.
Dated all the way back to the 80s.
Back to 1984, in my memory. Came out and he picked up notes that were on Hillary Clinton's lectern, which she was entitled to write during the debate. There he is. There you see him there, and he picked up her notes, and
right.
Later
it was alleged that he then handed them off to Lester Holt, which was proof of some nefarious conspiracy. But so there he is. That's Brady Williamson, the longtime Democratic operative, taking Hillary Clinton's notes after the debate has ended. And the allegation was that he was then handing them off to Lester Holt. If you look at the video, and we all have the same video from the switched pool feed, there is no evidence of any handoff to Lester Holt.
You see their paths cross on the debate stage, right?
Right.
But you don't see a handoff.
No. And even if what was he handing off? The notes that had from the debate that had just concluded? Why would Lester Holt want those?
I think the theory was that she had the questions in advance furnished by NBC, and that they were on the lectern, and that he came up and picked the questions up.
Incriminating marginalia.
And you see him walk back and pass Lester Holt, and that he then gave them back to Lester Holt, you see, returning them to NBC that had given them to him. The video shows them cross, but as you point out, James, it does not show a handoff.
It's a marvelous theory. There's no evidence for it. I have been tough in other forums on Lester Holt for his performance in this debate, but there's no evidence he was part of anything sinister.
James, thanks very much. And all eyes are on Longwood, Virginia tomorrow. The vice presidential nominees will square off. Will tomorrow's debate at that college match the intensity of the first presidential debate? We'll talk about that next. So the question arises on the eve of a vice presidential debate, and will be talked about tomorrow as well. Do they really matter? Has there ever been a time when a vice presidential debate had a significant impact on an election? Our nightly political panel is back. National political correspondent, National Public Radio, Mara Lassen, and Fortune Magazine senior editor Nina Easton. Mara, can you remember a vice presidential debate? Well, first of all, can you remember a vice
I can remember one pretty well. You're no Jack Kennedy. That, I think, is the most famous moment in any vice presidential debate. And even though it did not affect the outcome, Quayle went on to be the vice president, actually. It did, I would say, drive a stake through the heart of his future presidential ambitions.
I was actually a questioner at that debate in 1988. Dan Quayle, of course, running for vice president against Lloyd Bentsen on the Democratic side. And I asked him the question, if something happened to the president and you became president suddenly, what would be the first thing you do? Well, he had trouble with the question, and I thought, and then Lloyd Bentsen had a very smooth answer. But, of course, he'd had time to think about it while Quayle was struggling.
Right.
So the second round, I asked Quayle the question again, and he struggled with it again. And I thought, well, that'll be the end of that. And then Tom Brokaw, who was on the panel as well, asked it a third time, and he made reference to Jack Kennedy, whereupon Lloyd Bentsen weighs in and he says, Senator, I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine, and you're no Jack Kennedy, and the audience all roared, and that was the moment of the night. It did not, however, as you point out, make a difference in the election. It made a difference
to Dan Quayle's future, but not to him being vice president.
Well, that's right, and I would also note that it would later determine that Lloyd Bentsen and Jack Kennedy had not been very close friends at all. Go ahead, Nina, your thoughts.
Well, I think, the other counterpart to that is the famous Stockdale moment, the VP for Ross Perot, who had his moment of...
who was he?
He was an admiral.
Right. Retired.
Right. And kind of on the debate stage just kind of started talking incoherently.
Why am I here? Who am I?
Why am I here? And why am I here?
Yeah.
But we're not going to see that with this cast. I mean, these are two serious, practiced politicians, seasoned guys. I mean, Mike Pence, he joked that, we're B-list. I'm a B-list Republican celebrity. I'm not the main event. He's somebody that has he has a serious policy chops. He's got connections to mainstream Republicans. He's got a lot of respect. Tim Kaine, same thing. I mean, I just don't see any moment like that
let me ask you this
happening in this.
It clearly would help the Trump campaign if Mike Pence were able to mount a stout defense of nominee Donald Trump on the issue of his taxes, on some of the other issues that have been raised against him, that at the moment at least, following the debate performance, appear to be hurting him. Is that possible?
I think it's going to be really hard. Mike Pence has done a yeoman's job trying to sand down the rough edges of Donald Trump. He's a practiced speechmaker. He was a radio talk show host before he got into politics. The problem is that he could be asked about every outrageous thing that Donald Trump has said.
He will be asked.
And how is he going to square those circles? It's one thing to give the argument, about his taxes. He only paid what he was legally able to do, and he's a very successful businessman. But asked about Miss Universe, asked about he's already differed with Trump on climate change. Trump says it's a Chinese hoax, and Pence says it is result of human activity. So I think he has the bigger job than Tim Kaine.
Yeah, what about Kaine? What can Kaine do to help Mrs. Clinton not make mistakes, or has he got are there things that he can affirmatively do that would move the ball forward for her?
Probably give an unmemorable performance. That unmemorable probably helps.
Just don't mess up.
Don't mess up.
Don't mess up.
Certainly, I mean, he's going to have that. He's going to have to. Defend the email stuff and all of that, but they've got their pat answer for that. I think, on the Republican side, Pence has been very kind of careful, politic. I think he said, we'll build the wall, but we're not going to make Mexico pay for it. Sort of came around on that. He's been very kind of careful on what he's embraced and what he hasn't embraced. I just think the heat's going to be more on...
He's embraced nearly everything.
I think he's going to be, but I think the heat is going to be more on him than Tim Kaine. But we'll see.
And and they have the hole to climb out of now because of what Trump did in the first debate.
Yeah.
All right, Mara.
We'll be watching.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay.
Nowadays, if you have a conspiracy theory, you have a place to voice it. I'm speaking, of course, of Twitter, which lit up over the weekend with talk of Hillary's alleged cheating at last Monday's debate. Eric P. Gillespie asked me, quote, "Are you going to report on Hillary's teleprompter and Lester's earpiece during the debate?" To which I replied, "No, we're too busy working on a story about Hillary getting special instructions through her fillings," end quote. Well, that did not go down very well. Jackie Vassar said, quote, "Don't kid yourself, Hume. With a Clinton, all things are possible." And John Woods tweeted, "Keep smirking, Britt. You're one of the Bushies and Clintons. She did have the questions, and you know it." Colby James Edgar said, "Britt, your tweet about fillings shows no journalistic integrity. Shameful. You've given up being serious, just phoning it in." I know 207 tweeted, "I'm glad you think it's a funny subject. I see you're drinking the Hillary tea." And finally, Brad Wood asked, "She has fillings? Release dental records now." Please keep the feedback coming, folks. We really do like hearing from you. Tweet me using @BrittHume or email ontherecord@foxnews.com. That's about it for us tonight. The O'Reilly Factor is up next with Karl Rove on the vice presidential debate. And Bill's talking points are about why people are voting this year against candidates and not for them. We leave you, as always, with our political quote of the day. This one from the late drama critic and author John Mason Brown, who said, quote, "Nowhere are prejudices more mistaken for truth, passion for reason, and invective for documentation than in politics." And don't forget to watch Fox News for live coverage of tomorrow's vice presidential debate at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll be back here at 7 Eastern tomorrow. Good night.